I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. We have a lot of topics, a lot of information to share with you tonight, a lot going on in the news. We know this is African American History Month. This is week 2, I guess the second full week of African American History Month. Some of you all came to the presentation I did last weekend at Nandy's Knowledge Cafe, 2-day lecture series. And we dealt with breaking the chains while we celebrate Black History Month. Breaking the chains while we celebrate Black History Month. All right, so a lot going on. We know last weekend was the Super Bowl. Last Sunday was the Super Bowl, February 4th. And there was a Super Bowl commercial from Dodge featuring an excerpt of Dr. King's speech, The Drum Major Instinct. A lot of people were upset about that, so we'll talk about that. But our main topic tonight, which we'll deal with in the first hour, is what kids are really learning about slavery in school. What are kids really learning about slavery in school? What are our children really learning about slavery in school? Most students don't know slavery was a central cause of the Civil War, a new study shows. So we're going to talk about that. It's a new study out from the Southern Poverty Law Center. A very extensive study that deals with how the topic of slavery in schools is oftentimes mistaught, sentimentalized, and students are alarmingly misinformed as a result. Okay, this has wide-ranging ramifications because these people go on to be police officers, they go on to be judges, attorneys, prosecuting attorneys, lawmakers, possibly the President of the United States. They go on to be hiring managers for corporations, etc. So this has wide-ranging implications also. All right, so we'll talk about that. And then there's a story about a white principal who banned a African-American student whose name is Malcolm Xavier, banned him from having the name Malcolm X on his senior sweater, okay, in high school, and Malcolm X is his real name. Okay, there was we posted articles about this on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. The African History Network. We posted articles about that this week, and actually today. TheGrio.com, News1.com has articles about this. YourBlackWorld.net. It's a big story, and he is a student in Queens, New York. So we'll talk about that some. Also interesting, this is taking place during African American History Month, right? This type of disrespect. And the principal told him that Malcolm X is not someone you want to be associated with. Really? Interesting. This ties right into also the topic of what are they teaching our children about slavery in school. Very, very, very important how a lot of that information is totally wrong. Then also we know the film Black Panther debuts this Friday, February 16th. The much anticipated Black Panther film from Marvel Studios about the Black Panther superhero who's the Prince of Wakanda, a fictional African country. And we know there was a lead up to this from the Captain America movie and also the Avengers movie. They had Chadwick Boseman, who played Jackie Robinson. He played Thurgood Marshall. He played the Godfather Soul, James Brown. He is the Black Panther. So that film debuts this Friday, February 16th. I'll definitely go and see it. Don't know if I'll see it this coming weekend. I'm trying to find some. There's some special screenings going on in the Detroit area. Different groups doing this. We know that about $200 million in pre-ticket sales have already taken place. It's the movie's breaking records. But there is a petition going around, an online petition asking for Marvel to give 25% of the profits from the Black Panther movie to invest in the African American community, because we know a large percentage of these dollars that they're going to get are coming from African Americans. So there's a petition going around online asking for 25% of the profits of the movie Black Panther, which is probably one of the blackest movies we've seen in years, Stars Chadwick Boseman. You have Michael B. Jordan. You have Lupita Nyong'o, Angela Bassett, Forrest Whitaker. This is an all-star cast. This is fantastic. Okay. Then you have an effort to raise money to send 23,000 students to go see this movie also. So hashtag Black Panther Challenge, hashtag Black Panther Challenge has raised more than $300,000 to do this, because this is a very, very important film for our children to see, because this shows Africa in a positive light. Most of the African-American female characters in the movie have natural hairstyles, which is something they really need to see. They need to embrace their Africanity, their African beauty. It shows African people running their own nation. So this is a very, very powerful film that people need to see, okay? And we understand the power of image. Dr. Leonard Jeffries, one of my teachers, said that the whoever controls the images controls the self-esteem, the self-worth, the self-development of the people. Whoever controls the history controls the vision. We know that whatever is disseminated becomes imitated. This is why we have a dumbing down of hip-hop music, so that you have a dumbed down people. So the film Black Panther is going to be a very, very powerful film. And this is an opportunity to teach our children about African American history, about African history, etc. And this is taking place during African American History Month. So it was an excellent, excellent time for this film to come out. We'll also deal with this date in African American history, this date in African American history as well. Okay. Now, on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here on the show. We deal with current events and history and politics and education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828. To sign up for our email newsletter, text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828. To sign up for our email newsletter, or go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay. All right. Those watching on Facebook, share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. Okay, so we know today is the 388th day of the Donald Trump regime. Midterm elections are extremely important. I don't think he's going to be there much longer. We saw two high-level staff members resign in the last couple of days, Thursday and Friday, I think it was. So his administration is imploding. His administration is imploding. We have never seen this type of turnover in the first 13 months, 14 months of a presidential administration. So the Southern Poverty Law Center has a new study that just came out. And the Atlantic magazine, theatlantic.com, had an article from February 1st, 2018. Just a few days ago, February 1st, 2018. And the name of the article is What Kids Are Really Learning About Slavery. What Kids Are Really Learning About Slavery. A new study finds that the topic is mistaught and often sentimentalized, and students are alarmingly misinformed as a result. Students are alarmingly misinformed as a result, okay? Now, the question that some people may ask is, why is the topic of slavery so important? That happened so long ago, okay? The slavery ended in 1865, right? What does that have to do with today, okay? Well, to understand why things are the way they are today, you have to understand how they are the culmination of a sequence of historical events. Historical events do not happen in a vacuum. We saw the protests over the removal of a statue of General Robert E. Lee in Charlottesville, Virginia, August 12th. Is that General Robert E. Lee was against the erecting of Confederate monuments. So here you have August 12, 2017, Charlottesville, Virginia. You have this protest called Unite the Right, organized by 12 white supremacist organizations, white supremacist alt-right organizations. They do not understand history. They're carrying flags and versions of a flag that they call the Confederate flag. But the flag that we saw on the General Lee car on the TV show The Dukes of Hazzard, that flag never flew over the Confederate States of America. There were 3 flags that flew over the Confederate States of America from 1861 to 1865. That flag was never one of them. General Robert E. Lee was against using the Confederate battle flag, because that's the Confederate battle flag of General Robert E. Lee's army in Northern Virginia and some other smaller armies. General Robert E. Lee was not only against using the Confederate battle flag after the Civil War ended, but he was also against erecting Confederate monuments. So here you have people who don't understand history in Charlottesville, Virginia, and Charlottesville was named after Queen Charlotte Sophia, who was the wife of King George III during the American Revolutionary War, and she was of African descent. They don't know that either. And they are trying to preserve the Confederate monument of a man who was against Confederate monuments. So what happens when people are mistaught history? Not just African American students, but students in general in this country. So if we look at this article from theatlantic.com, it talks about how a class of middle schoolers in Charlotte, North Carolina. First, they talk about how a lot of the, you hear stories from periodically in the news about different lessons of slavery that are taught. They may have mock auctions, things like this. And they talk about the insensitivity and how the topic of slavery is being taught. But a class of middle schoolers in Charlotte, North Carolina, right, was asked to cite 4 reasons why Africans made good slaves. 9 third grade teachers in suburban Atlanta assigned math word problems about slavery and beatings. A high school in Los Angeles, in the Los Angeles area, reenacted a slave ship with students lying on the dark classroom floor, wrist taped, as staff played the role of slave ship captains. And for a lesson on colonial America, 5th graders at a school in northern New Jersey had to create posters advertising slave auctions. Now, school assignments on slavery routinely draw national headlines and scorn, yet beyond the outraged parents and school district apologies lies a complex and entrenched set of education challenges. A new report released by the Southern Poverty Law Center, Southern Poverty Law Center's Teaching Tolerance Project, points to the widespread failure to accurately teach the hard and nuanced history of American slavery and enslaved people, enslaved African people. Collectively, the report finds that slavery is mistaught, mischaracterized, sanitized, and sentimentalized, leaving students poorly educated and contemporary issues of race and racism misunderstood. So if they don't understand the history and the impact that the enslavement of African people had on this country, they won't understand the present and won't be able to properly govern, properly plan for the future. This is for African American children, white children, Asians, etc. This is for everybody. When we study Dr. Carter G. Woodson, and we talk about the origins of African American History Month, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who founded Negro History Week in 1926, Dr. Carter G. Woodson said that he felt that the history of African people needed to be taught in every school across the country, not just African American schools, because he firmly believed, and he was correct, that a lot of the prejudice, bigotry, etc., comes from people not being taught our history, not understanding our accomplishments and achievements, therefore thinking we don't have any, therefore thinking we are lesser than or have no value. And this allows stereotypes to be projected through the media and people to internalize these stereotypes and then operate based upon them. So in what it describes, what the Southern Poverty Law Center describes as the first analysis of its kind, Teaching Tolerance conducted online surveys of 1,000 American high school seniors, 1,000 American high school seniors, and more than 1,700 social studies teachers across the country. The group also reviewed 10 commonly used U.S. history textbooks and examined 15 sets of state standards to assess what students know, what educators teach, what publishers include, and what standards require what standards are required vis-a-vis slavery. So when we look at 12th graders, among 12th graders, only 8% could identify slavery as the cause of the Civil War. Among 12th graders, they're going to graduate, they're going to go to college, go into the military, go into a trade school. Among 12th graders, only 8% could identify slavery as the cause of the Civil War. Fewer than 1/3, or 32%, could correctly name the 13th Amendment as the formal end of U.S. slavery. The 13th Amendment. There had to be an amendment to the U.S. Constitution. With a slightly higher share, or 35%, chose the Emancipation Proclamation. The Emancipation Proclamation, January 1st, 1863, did not end slavery. It was the 13th Amendment that was ratified December 6, 1865, and adopted December 18, 1865. Fewer than half of the 12th graders, or 46%, identified the Middle Passage as the transport of enslaved Africans across the Atlantic Ocean to North America. So these students are woefully ignorant about slavery, African history, African American history. Okay? This has wide-ranging implications. Now, Maureen Costello, the director of Teaching Tolerance, said the research conducted in 2017 revealed the urgent need for schools to do a better job of teaching slavery. She said that, quote, students are being deprived of the truth about our history, and the materials that teachers have not and the materials that teachers have are not particularly good, end quote. She went on to say, I would hope that students would look at this and realize that they deserve to know better, and teachers need to know there are better ways to teach this topic. Okay? Now, the students' results, which the report labels as dismal, extend beyond factual errors to a failure to grasp key concepts underpinning the nature and legacy of slavery. Okay? Let me repeat that. Okay? The students' results, which the report labels as dismal, extend beyond factual errors to a failure to grasp key concepts underpinning the nature and legacy of slavery. Okay? We're coming up on a break here. We're going to continue this on the other side of the break. We're dealing with a new study that deals with what are our kids learning about slavery in school and how that topic is being mistaught, so children are being miseducated. I'm Michael Imhotep. You listen to the African History Network show, 9:10 a.m. the Superstation of Future Radio. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, the voice of Detroit. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. If you like this type of information, visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All of my DVD lectures are there. If you want to order those, we have about 800 audio podcasts of our radio shows there. Connects you to our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep on YouTube, where we have about almost 700 video clips there, because I've uploaded some last week. Almost 700 video clips on our YouTube channel. So a lot of information there, okay? AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right. Okay. So, and somebody on Facebook said that something to the effect, what they say, we need to teach this history in our schools. We need to really force the right education to be taught throughout our school systems for our youth, said Willie Daniels on Facebook. Let's see. All right. So, And somebody else made a comment, what's the name of the study you're reporting on? So the name of the study is from the Southern Poverty Law Center. Check out the article from theatlantic.com, called What Kids Are Really Learning About Slavery. What Kids Are Really Learning About Slavery. That's the article from theatlantic.com. The name of the study is called Teaching Tolerance. Teaching Tolerance. It's from the Teaching Tolerance Project, which is part of the Southern Poverty Law Center. Okay. Calling numbers 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. All right, let's go back to this, then we'll go to the phone lines in a few minutes here. Okay, so the student results, which the report labels as dismal, extend beyond the factual errors to a failure to grasp key concepts underpinning the nature and legacy of slavery. Fewer than 1/4, or only 22% of participating high school seniors in this study knew that protections for slavery were embedded in America's founding documents, okay, the U.S. Constitution. That rather than a peculiar institution of the South, slavery was a constitutionally enshrined right. This is encoded into the U.S. Constitution. You have the Three-Fifths Compromise of 1787, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution, which we've talked about on this show, which did not state that enslaved Africans were 3/5 of a human being. That dealt with trying to figure out how to count the enslaved population for the purposes of determining how many seats in the House of Representatives a particular slaveholding state would have. If you go on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, or go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, actually I have a DVD presentation on that, dealing with the history of the Three-Fifths Compromise and the Electoral College. Because the Electoral College, created in the U.S. Constitution, 1787, and the Three-Fifths Compromise, you're also going to have the 12th Amendment of around 1803, I think it was, that dealt with, that revised the Electoral College. These both work to give southern states, southern slaveholding states, a dominance in the House of Representatives that gave them more of a incentive to keep slavery in place. This is in the U.S. Constitution. Okay? So, fewer than only 22% of the seniors in this study knew that protections for slavery were embedded in the founding documents of this country. And also, they did not know slavery was a constitutionally enshrined right. And fewer than 4 in 10 students surveyed, or 39%, understood how slavery, quote, shaped the fundamental beliefs of Americans about race and whiteness, end quote. Only 39% of seniors who are going to go to college, go into the military, go into trade school, go have jobs, what have you. Later, these people are going to be law enforcement. There'll be judges, prosecuting attorneys. There'll be lawmakers. Only 39% understood how slavery shaped the fundamental beliefs of Americans about race and whiteness. Now, examining the teacher survey results might help explain why students struggle to answer questions on American enslavement. Educators are struggling themselves. I talk to teachers. A lot of them don't have a real grasp on African American history, the history of slavery, don't understand the I Have a Dream speech from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., delivered August 28, 1963, which the speech mainly was not even about a dream. The original name of the speech was called A Council Check. It's been renamed I Have a Dream. He was talking about economics in the speech. So this is not to attack teachers. This is saying that this has to change. So as I said to the people on Facebook who are watching, I said when you have parent groups who are going into the schools and they're meeting with the school board, or they're meeting with teachers, they're meeting with principals, and they're advocating for a curriculum change, they're advocating for supplemental material to be included in the curriculum. You can't go in with feelings and emotions. You have to go in with facts and evidence. You have to take these studies in, take these articles that deal with the studies. You have to deal with the facts and evidence to build your case, to make your argument. So, Examining the teacher's survey results might help to explain why students struggle to answer questions on American enslavement. Educators are struggling themselves. While teachers overwhelmingly, 92% of teachers, claim they are comfortable discussing slavery in their classrooms, their teaching practices reveal profound lapses. Their teaching practices reveal profound lapses. Call-in number 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number. If you have a question or comment, let's go to the phone lines. Let's go to Al, line 1. Al, welcome to the African History Network show. Tell us where, all right, tell us where you're calling from.
I'm calling from Detroit. Well, I got to say, Mike, I love you, man, because you've been taking knowledge for a long time. I've been following you ever since the Black Empowerment Radio.
Yeah, Empowerment Radio Network.
I learned a lot.
Thanks.
Yeah, you hooked me up. I mean, I thought I knew a lot, but just listening to your podcast show, the sad part about it, I don't think, like you were saying, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment was for African American people. When you put me to the books that Dr. Clark Anderson, he gave me more of an understanding. Again, I started listening on Roland Martin.
Yeah.
Start kicking more knowledge. The sad part about it is, I don't think people realize that they even had, like you used to say years, you said a long time ago, that the Civil Rights Act didn't start in 1960. It was in 1866, the first Civil Rights Act. And then
that's the one that passed, 1866. The one in 1865 was vetoed.
Overthrown.
Yep.
I think got overthrown by John Marshall. I think Harlan.
President Andrew Johnson. President Andrew Johnson vetoed the one in 1865, and the one in 1866 passed.
You know, but the justice who was in Plessy versus Ferguson, he had something to do with it again. So after with you, I don't think most people even know the history of Reconstruction or slavery or Jim Crow,
right,
and have a real good grasp. And I just wanted to bring this up. What about the different act, the first Ku Klux Klan Act, the Civil Rights Act of 1870, and the second one, I think, was 1871.
Yeah, 1871. That was an anti-intimidation act. Yeah, Ku Klux Klan Act, that was an anti-intimidation act, yeah. That's still in existence. It was weakened by the Supreme Court. I think it was around 1875, something like that. But it's still on the books today. And during the 2016 election cycle, that act came up because when Democrats sued the Trump administration and Republicans, the Trump campaign and Republicans in certain states, one of the violations that they charged was violation of the 1871 Ku Klux Klan Act.
And see, that's the thing that most people don't know, Mike. And also, like you talked about over Air Holder and Shelbyville in Alabama, they gutted the civil rights. I mean, the voting act. Most people don't even understand the provision that they did away with. I mean, me personally, I just wish people would know this history. And I also, I'm gonna be honest with you, Mike, I want white people to know this history.
Absolutely.
They're so aloof when it comes to knowledge about this country and how it has treated black people. It's crazy. And I'll just leave it at that, Mike.
Okay, Al, thanks for calling in. Okay, call back in. 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number. If you have a question or comment, 313-778-7600. All right. So Al was referring to Shelby County versus Holder, 2013 U.S. Supreme Court decision, which gutted Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which dealt with the pre-clearance, the oversight. So when these former Southern states, they had a history of putting in obstacles in the way of African Americans trying to vote. The Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act stated that if they wanted to make any changes to the number of voting polls that they had, the number of weeks for early voting, that they had anything like this, what happened is that they had to get clearance from a federal judge. When Shelby County, which is in Alabama, and we know Alabama was the seat of the fight for the right to vote, at 1965. When that was struck down, that weakened Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which opened everything up to a whole new round of voter ID, voter suppression laws, and voter suppression tactics, okay? All right, so let's continue. We'll go back to the phone lines in just a minute. 313-778. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. Okay, so examining the teacher's survey results might help explain why students struggled to answer questions on American enslavement. Educators are struggling themselves. While teachers overwhelmingly, 92% of teachers in this study, claim they are comfortable discussing slavery in their classrooms, their teaching practices reveal profound lapses. Only slightly more than half, or 52% of teachers in this survey, teach their students about slavery's legal roots in the nation's founding documents, while just 53% of teachers emphasize the extent of slavery outside of the antebellum South. Okay? They don't talk about slavery in the North, the impact that it had in the North, how slavery fueled the economy. Not just cotton, not just the production of cotton, but there were at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country from 1619 to 1865 that built this country. Built everything from the White House to the U.S. Capitol building. At least 262 skills, trades, and crafts. Then after the Civil War ends, then you start having a lot of these national labor unions pop up, like the National Labor Union, 1866, which was designed to lock African Americans out of these jobs we had been doing for 246 years, mainly for free, to protect these jobs for white men and immigrants coming to this country, to this country, white immigrants coming to this country. And 54% of teachers teach the continuing legacy of slavery in today's society. Only 54% of teachers teach the continuing legacy of slavery in today's society. Now, additionally, dozens of teachers rely on simulations, role-playing, and games to teach slavery, a method that the study Teaching Tolerance from the Southern Poverty Law Center has warned against on the grounds that it can lead to stereotypes and oversimplification. Meanwhile, a large majority, or 73% of teachers, use the term slaves when talking about slavery in the classroom instead of enslaved persons, or the term enslaved Africans. Okay? Now, 49% use the term enslaved persons. Okay? 49% use the term enslaved persons. 73% use the term, 73% use the term slaves when talking about slavery in the classroom instead of enslaved persons. Now, the latter term enslaved persons, of which has gained favor for emphasizing the humanity of those forced into bondage. I usually say enslaved Africans because that's who was enslaved. And these were African people. Stripped of their nationality, stripped largely of their history and culture, spiritual systems, etc. Now, the overwhelming majority of teachers who participated in this survey, or 90% of them, are somehow affiliated with Teaching Tolerance and its learning materials. Okay, the Teaching Tolerance study from the Southern Poverty Law Center. Now, they reference Maureen Costello again, who's the director of Teaching Tolerance. And Maureen Costello said, this indicates the problems revealed in the survey results could be much more pervasive than the findings suggest. This indicates that the problems revealed in the survey results could be much more pervasive than the findings suggest. She said, if anything, I think this collection of survey respondents is a group that's more sensitive to issues of race, more likely to confront them in classrooms. This is compared to the broader teaching workforce, she explained, adding that the findings are, quote, a silhouette of the problem, end quote. The findings are a silhouette of the problem. Similarly, many of those surveyed were elementary school teachers, which Maureen Costello said was noteworthy considering the ability of slavery education in the early grades to form the narrative, the quote-unquote fake history that students carry through high school. this was noteworthy considering the ability of slavery education in the early grades to form the narrative of quote-unquote fake history that students carry with them through high school. All right, let's go to the phone lines. Once again, the call-in number is 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number. Listen to the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep. We're talking about a new study from the Southern Poverty Law Center called Teaching Tolerance, which deals with what are our kids really learning about slavery in the classrooms, and it deals with how largely they are being mistaught about the topic of slavery. Okay, let's go to John, line 1. John, thanks for holding. Welcome to the African History Network show. Tell us where you're calling from.
Well, thank you, Hotep, for putting out the knowledge and educating all the people. Listen, they said that those students was on the website and on the internet and all, they getting this stuff off of there. They said, and the ones that read, sit down and comprehend the reading the book and so forth, they were much more update and much more smarter and quicker on their feet than the one that was on my website and on my Facebook and all that stuff. Getting their knowledge off of there. And I want to ask you, does the black colleges teach that, the subject you were talking about, the African American college and so forth? Because that's what they say, how do we need it? You told all right we need it.
Yeah. Largely the HBCUs do teach that history. They have a lot. Most of them have like an Afro-American Studies department or Africana Studies department. So largely the HBCUs teach that history, but it has to be taught properly in schools all across the country, not just for African American students. Go ahead.
So that's right. And they said that so some of them are what you call them white supremacy were putting garbage on the website and Facebook and using other names according to this subject, the Freedom Party or something like that and all that stuff. So I just want to know what you were familiar with that and so forth.
The Freedom Party. I'm familiar with the Freedom Caucus. The Freedom Party. You'll have. There's been a rise in white supremacist activity and recruitment on college campuses also. Okay.
That's right.
And this is under the age of Donald Trump, who largely does not condemn these white supremacist organizations because he's a white supremacist himself.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I just want to thank you and teach for the knowledge. And the Philadelphia, they weren't going to show up at Trump and so forth.
Yeah, a lot of the Philadelphia Eagles players said they're not showing up to the White House. Malcolm Jenkins was one of them. Yeah, because they won the Super Bowl. Okay, John, thanks for calling. Okay, let's go to Quentin, line 2. Hey, Quentin, thanks for holding. Welcome to the African History Network show. Tell us which city you're calling from.
Calling from the Big D.
Okay, Detroit.
How you doing?
All right, what's going on, man? Thanks for holding.
Tell me, what about the third verse of the national anthem is so offensive?
Well, third verse, first of all, national anthem was written by Francis Scott Key, September 13th, 1814. He was a white slave owner. He was a white supremacist. He thought that African people were mentally inferior. He also used his position as U.S. District Attorney U.S. Attorney to Washington, D.C., District of Columbia, to attack abolitionists who were fighting to free enslaved African people. So the third verse says, no refuge for the hireling or the slave. And this is largely thought to deal with the colonial Marines, because the colonial Marines were a group of formerly enslaved African people who run from the U.S. side to fight on behalf of the British. We know that Francis Scott Key was he fought in the War of 1812, because the poem originally was called A Defense of Fort McHenry. It's later going to be called the Star Spangled Banner. It starts out as a poem that he wrote after witnessing the attack by British troops on Fort McHenry in Baltimore. 3 weeks before that, Francis Scott Key's unit was attacked by the colonial Marines and got their behinds kicked by these African troops. Okay, so what that deals with, no refuge for the hiding of the slave. Now, the problem is, it ain't just the third verse, it's the entire song. The entire song is a white supremacist song.
I didn't see the word slave in the third verse.
Well, what source did you look at?
The national anthem, all verses. That's what I was looking at.
Go to the root.com, and search for the racist history of the Star Spangled Banner, something like that. Dr. Jason Johnson wrote an article about that. Now, what takes place is there's been an attempt to sanitize the third verse, or just remove the third stanza. There's been an attempt to sanitize the third stanza, or just remove it altogether. So most people
originally it said slave. That's what you're saying.
No. That's originally what it was, because it wasn't a problem talking about slave. What I'm saying is recently there has been an attempt to sanitize it. Now that people know about it, there's been an attempt to sanitize it. One, number two. Largely, when people sing the Star Spangled Banner, they don't sing the third stanza. They only sing like the first portion of it. Largely, they don't sing like the entire song. Okay, so most people haven't researched Francis Scott Key either to understand who he is. So this deals with how the history of the past shows up in the present and the future. This is why understanding our history is so important. All right, thanks for calling, Quentin.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks for calling. Okay, let's go to line 3. A1, welcome to the African History Network show. Tell us which city you're calling from.
Detroit.
Okay, what's going on? Thanks for holding.
Yes, great. Yeah, thank you. Great show as usual.
Thanks.
I enjoyed your presentation. The extent I was there.
Oh yeah, Nandy's Knowledge Cafe. Yeah.
Man, it's beautiful over there, man. Y'all doing a great job, man.
Oh, thanks.
I love that new facility.
Right.
If people can come, I always will promote it. It's energy in there that's out of this world, the literature, the cooking, the environment. If you want some history and some good literature, go to Nandy's. But anyway, I wanted to touch on something like, as far as like when they built the African American Museum downtown.
Yeah.
They had an issue with the how the models of the slaves were presented there. They said that they were looking too like children on a playground or something. You remember that display they had with the slaves on the ship?
Right.
Yeah, it was just really kind of like some children. It wasn't
Right.
like,
they use real children as the models,
like,
so people understand what you're talking about. Yeah, they use real children as the models for the slaves for this display.
Right, and that was controversial. Going, like what you're feeding into what you're saying, like your topic for today, how it's watered down. The versions are in our education system are very watered down, minute, and it's doing a great disservice to this country and this world, because we have been living on a pack of lies and myths, and it doesn't do anything but for the so-called fathers and the writers and the authors and the people that have shaped the country verbally and in the textbooks.
Right.
That's why you cannot respect it, because it's an untruth. And I want to commend you again and thank you for pointing these things out and having people to broaden their thinking, to research it and make their own opinion on it. And the facts will stand. I don't care how far you go, who you look up, what race, creed, what dirt you dig up, what hieroglyph you look at, what angle of the sun you look at.
Right.
The darkness, the stars, is going to point to Africa and the greatness of the black man and the history and the rottenness of this country and what it was built on.
Right.
From the money to the legislation, however you pronounce it, to the government system, to everything. It's corrupt, it's a lie, and it's a bunch of slave mongers, Viking mentality. There's nothing civilized about it. It's ridiculous that we still live these lives.
All right, thanks for calling, One.
Thanks again.
Thanks for calling. All right, 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. All right, so back to this article from theatlantic.com called What Kids Are Really Learning About Slavery. What kids are really learning about slavery. This is on February 1st, 2018, just a few days ago, so it's a timely topic. This came out the first day of African American History Month. Okay, so it goes on to say, it talks about a high school U.S. history teacher in Lake Oswego, Oregon, which is a suburb of Portland, Oregon. Her name is Ursula Wolf Rocca, R-O-C-C-A, Rocca. I guess that's how you pronounce it, Ursula Wolf Rocca. And she has encountered students' common misconceptions about slavery, such as the belief that Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, which he did not, and that the Civil War was really about states' rights, which was not. Her straightforward solution is assigning original documents. And she said, quote, read Lincoln's first inaugural address, and you do not find a fiery abolitionist, but someone promising to enforce the fugitive slave clause. She said, read the Articles of Succession, from the 11 states that secede from the Union. And she said, you find striking declarations from slave states that their actions are rooted in a desire to protect slavery. Okay? So Abraham Lincoln became president-elect November 6, 1860. Okay? We know that on December 20th, 1860, South Carolina was the first state to secede from the Union, because Abraham Lincoln was of the abolitionist of the Republican Party, which was formed in 1854 by groups of abolitionists, as a direct result to the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, that gave sovereignty to those people in the U.S. moving into Western territory. It left it up to them to decide whether or not they wanted to have slavery in this Western territory, as opposed to it being dictated by the U.S. government. So as a direct result to the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, we have the Republican Party being formed by groups of abolitionists in 1854. Okay? So because you have southern states that think Lincoln is going to free the slaves, all right, in his inaugural address, his first inaugural address, which was March 4th, 1861, Lincoln proclaimed that it was his duty to maintain the Union. It was his duty to maintain the Union. He also declared that he had no intention of ending slavery where it existed, or of repealing the fugitive slave law. Now, this was a position that horrified African Americans and their white allies, or horrified Frederick Douglass, or horrified African Americans who were abolitionists, as well as white abolitionists. Okay? Read the article, The Civil War and Emancipation, from PBS.org, Public Broadcasting System. The Civil War and Emancipation, from PBS.org. Then when we look at the statements of secession, the statements of secession clearly stated that they were seceding from the Union to keep slavery in place. Okay? And if you look at the article from, there was an article from, check out the article from theatlantic.com from May 1st, 2017 called Why There Was a Civil War. Why There Was a Civil War. Because that article deals with the statements of secession. They made it plain. Malcolm X said, make it plain. They made it plain. They were succeeding because of slavery. They were afraid the North was going to free the slaves. They talked about how slavery was central to their wealth, etc. This is what this was over. Okay, this is what this was about. Okay, so high school teacher Ursula Wolf Rocca goes on to say, the article goes on to say, still, she echoed the report's teacher respondents in stressing the inherent challenges in tackling the subject of slavery. As a white teacher, she admittedly struggles with presenting an unsanitized version of slavery that does not desensitize her students at Lake Oswego High School, which is in a suburb of Portland, Oregon, does not desensitize them to the violence and black pain. She said, kids walk into my class knowing about slavery, but their recitation of this knowledge is dull, lifeless, and bored. She said it has the feel of something memorized or rote, R-O-T-E, rather than internalized and meaningful. She goes on to say that she uses personal narratives of enslaved African people to teach the ugliness and injustice of the past while being, quote, careful to keep the rape and whipping to a minimum, end quote. Now, we're coming up on the break. We'll continue this some more on the other side of the break. Then we'll get into some of these other topics. We'll talk about how in Queens, New York, he had an African-American student. The white principal told him that he cannot have the word Malcolm X on his senior sweater, even though it was his name. We'll talk about Dodge using an excerpt of the speech from Dr. King to sell trucks that infuriated many people. This was a Super Bowl ad. And we'll talk about the Black Panther film that debuts February 16th also. This is the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep, 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, the Future Radio. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, the Voice of Detroit. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All of my DVD lectures are there. We have a recommended reading list of 60 books. There also, you can read all of my articles. Check out my article, Black History Month was never designed to be the only month we study our history. Black History Month was never designed to be the only month we study our history. I deal with the history of Dr. Carter G. Woodson. And then also check out my 3-hour presentation that I did February 3rd, 2018 in Andy's Knowledge Cafe, located at 71 Oakman Avenue in Highland Park, Michigan. 71 Oakman Avenue in Highland Park, Michigan. That presentation is called Breaking the Chains, while we celebrate African American History Month, exposing the myths. Breaking the Chains, while we celebrate African American History Month, exposing the myths. Call-in number is 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number. If you have a question or comment, we're continuing dealing with the topic of, from the first hour, what are kids really learning about slavery in school? What are kids really learning about slavery in school? Most students don't know slavery was a central cause of the Civil War, a new study shows. Okay, and this is a article from theatlantic.com, from February 1st, 2018, the first day of African American History Month, and it's from the studies from the Southern Poverty Law Center. Name of the study is called Teaching Tolerance. And this was a study that looked at, it surveyed 1,000 American high school seniors. It was an online survey of 1,000 American high school seniors and more than 1,700 social studies teachers across the country. Okay, the group also reviewed 10 commonly used U.S. history textbooks, and examined 15 sets of state standards to assess what students know, what educators teach, what publishers include in the textbooks, and what standards are required vis-a-vis slavery when it comes to teaching slavery also. Okay, all right, so let's continue here. So right before the break, we were talking about a white high school teacher named Ursula Wolf Rocca, who is a U.S. history teacher in Lake Oswego, Oregon, which is a suburb of Portland, Oregon. She teaches in the high school. And she said as a white teacher, she admittedly struggles with presenting an unsanitized version of slavery that does not desensitize her students at the school to the violence and black pain. She said kids walk into my class knowing about slavery, but their recitation of this knowledge is dull, lifeless, and bored. It has the feel of something memorized and rote, R-O-T-E, rather than internalized and meaningful. She goes on to say that she uses personal narratives of enslaved African people to teach the ugliness and the injustice of slavery of the past, while being, quote, careful to keep the rape and whipping to a minimum, end quote. Now, Ursula Wolf Rocca aims to strike a delicate balance, but she wonders whether she's whitewashing history. She wonders whether she is whitewashing history. She said, how do we surface the realities of slavery without resorting to spectacle? Now, like teachers cited in the report, she finds that exploring the true cost of slavery is difficult but essential. Now, further compounding teachers' difficulties is the quality of textbooks and state content standards. The quality of textbooks and state content standards. Okay? This deals with state law. The Teaching Tolerance study from the Southern Poverty Law Center found that textbooks generally lacked comprehensive coverage of slavery and enslaved people. The best textbook earned a score of 70 on the project's rubric of or list of essential elements for bringing slavery into the classroom. And state standards were generally timid, focused more on abolitionists than on the everyday experiences of slavery. Once again, the historical events don't happen in a vacuum. They are the sequence of they are the sequence of a culmination of historical events that have a domino effect and lead to a larger event taking place. So events that we see today, the racial insensitivity towards African Americans, the Unite the Right, the initiative to save Confederate monuments that were largely erected not to commemorate the Confederacy or Confederate soldiers, but largely erected to terrorize African Americans. Okay? When we understand how the history of the past shows up in the present and the future, then we understand the importance of history and the importance of correcting the history taught in the schools. So you had 11 states in the Confederate States of America, in the Confederacy. You had 11 states. Why are there 31 states that have Confederate monuments? Why are the Confederacy committed a treasonous act against the U.S., picked up arms against the U.S., separated, set up their own government, set up their own monetary system, and went to war with the U.S. That's a treasonous act. If you only had 11 states in the Confederacy, why do you have Confederate monuments in 31 states? So the two biggest periods of time that you have Confederate monuments, and I've done a presentation on this, I've done a lecture on this, 1895 to 1915 and 1955 to 1970. 1895 to 1915 is a period of time. 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson, okay, separate but equal, takes away, strips a lot of African Americans of their rights, cements the Jim Crow laws. You have a rise in racial terrorism against African Americans, a rise in the number of lynchings that are taking place each year in this country. And then 1955, 1970, basically the Civil Rights era. These were largely erected to terrorize African Americans and to keep us in our place. Okay? Southern Poverty Law Center has a study that deals with the Confederate monuments and shows you the periods of time that they were built. Okay, so back to this article. So taken together, the study exposes a number of unsettling facts about slavery education in U.S. classrooms. Slavery is taught without context, prioritizing feel-good stories over harsh realities. Slavery is taught as an exclusively Southern institution, which it was not, making the complicity of Northern institutions and citizens in America's slave-based economy. Slavery is rarely connected to white supremacy, the ideology that justified its perpetuation, and slavery is seldom connected to the present, to what's going on today. Drawing the arc from enslavement to Jim Crow, the civil rights movement, and the persistence of structural racism. So it makes it very hard for you to get your issues addressed as African Americans that have a foundation oftentimes in slavery and the maldistribution of wealth, power, and resources in this country coming out the end of the Reconstruction in 1877, the Compromise of 1877, the Jim Crow era convict leasing system from 1865 to 1928, the rise of the white labor unions to lock African Americans out of jobs they were doing largely for free for 246 years. Then the New Deal and the policies put in place by President Roosevelt in the New Deal that largely shifted these resources to the states, and they're going to distribute these resources based upon racial categories, based upon racial lines. This makes it very difficult for you to get your issues addressed that have a historical foundation when you're dealing with people who don't understand history. Now, LeGarrette King is an assistant professor of social studies education at the University of Missouri. And LeGarrette King served on the Teaching Tolerance Advisory Board that developed a framework for teaching American slavery. Basically, the concepts that every graduating high school senior should know as part of the report's recommendations, okay? So this person is on the Teaching Tolerance Advisory Board that developed a framework for teaching American slavery, and this basically consists of the concepts that every graduating high school senior should know, okay? Now, students training to be teachers, especially those being educated to teach in elementary schools, know little about the history of slavery, he stated, noting that, quote, much curriculum and teaching around racially and ethnically diverse people features a fun, foods, and festival approach to learning. A fun, foods, and festival approach to learning. I guess they're having a cookout, or some people used to call it a picnic. By contrast, LeGarrette King said the framework provides a guide to delve into topics such as slavery and African American history with a thorough and academically sound approach versus teaching slavery in a reductive and superficial way. LeGarrette King said, quote, "Can you teach slavery without it being psychologically violent to the children?" The answer is no. Violence will occur and is expected. The key is the recognition of white supremacy and of the humanity of African people that helps aid in the complexity of the subject. Can you teach the American Revolutionary War without talking about violence? No. Can you teach the Civil War without talking about violence? No. Can you teach World War I or World War II or the Vietnam War without talking about violence? No. They weren't shooting each other with water pistols. They were shooting each other with machine guns. They were shooting each other with rifles. Relatedly, the study called Teaching Tolerance also drew attention to teachers who struggle to have open and honest conversations in mixed-race classrooms about the atrocities of slavery. Antoinette Dempsey Waters, a black social studies educator at Wakefield High School in Arlington, Virginia, said that she relies on autobiographies to give a vivid picture of enslavement that helps all students in her highly diverse school, quote, walk away with the knowledge of the evil of slavery, end quote, as they come to understand and respect the fight for freedom waged by enslaved African people. She uses autobiographies. One of the autobiographies we need to share with our students is the autobiography of Frederick Douglass. Now, he wrote 3 of them. The first one was called the life of Frederick Douglass. Read the first one, the life of Frederick Douglass as told by a slave. Okay, the life of Frederick Douglass as told by a slave. I think that's the name of it. That one came out in I think about 1845. Okay, he wrote 3 autobiographies. But sharing autobiographies of enslaved African people is one way. Is one of the really important ways, because these are first-hand accounts. Now, the article goes on to say, notably, teaching tolerance, the study Teaching Tolerance recommends using primary sources and original historical materials to improve instruction and making textbooks better to reflect a more accurate and inclusive view of slavery. Quote, it's clear that the United States is still struggling with how to talk about the history of slavery and its aftermath. You had Donald Trump just a few months ago saying that the Confederate monuments need to be kept up. The Confederate monuments should not be taken down. When has a sitting U.S. president in modern times defended Confederate monuments that celebrated traitors to the U.S.? These are people who took up a treasonous act. He wants to talk about treason, people not clapping for him at the State of the Union address. When you go back and you watch all the State of the Union addresses from President Obama, and you see Republicans sitting there stoic, not clapping, even for good news. But Trump calls that a treasonous act, but he doesn't call the southern states, those 11 southern states that seceded from the Union, took up arms against the Union, apparently he doesn't call that treason. So it's clear that the United States is still struggling with how to talk about the history of slavery and its aftermath. The front lines of this struggle are in schools, as teachers do the hard work of explaining this country's history and helping students to understand how the present relates to the past. How the present relates to the past, okay? So check out this article. It's a fantastic article from theatlantic.com, theatlantic.com, okay? It's called, What Are Kids Really Learning About Slavery? What are kids really learning about slavery? This is from Atlantic.com. Then also check out the article from History.com. How the U.S. got so many Confederate monuments. How the U.S. got so many Confederate monuments. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, which compiled a list of these monuments in 2017, I think it was, 2016 and 2017, these monuments are spread over 31 states plus the District of Columbia. Confederate monuments in 31 states plus the District of Columbia, but you only had 11 Confederate states that seceded from the Union. That doesn't even make any sense. Now, AtlantaBlackStar.com had an article from February 10th, yesterday, February 10th, okay, 2018. Most states failed to cover 10 topics recommended to provide students a clear understanding of slavery. Most states failed to cover 10 topics recommended to provide students a clear understanding of slavery. This is from Atlantic.com, okay? And they talk about in the article, although slavery is a key component of black history, schools struggle to teach it well. They talk about the teaching tolerance study also, okay? They talk about the teaching tolerance study as well. And they lay out 10 topics. One, slavery, which predated European settlement, was important to all the colonial powers and existed in all of the European North American colonies. Two, slavery and the slave trader were central to the development and growth of the economy across British North America and later the United States. Three, protections of slavery were embedded in the founding documents. The founding documents of the United States. Enslavers dominated the federal government, the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Senate from 1787 through 1860. 4. Slavery was an institution of power, an institution of power designed to create profit for the slaveholder and break the will of the enslaved African, and was a relentless quest for profit abetted by racism. 5. Enslaved people resisted the efforts of their enslavers to reduce them to commodities in both revolutionary and everyday ways, such as slowing down work production, poisoning white people's food, running away, maiming themselves, faking illnesses, etc. 6. The experience of slavery varied depending on time, location, crop, the crop that was grown, labor performed, size of slave holding on that plantation, and gender. 7. Slavery was the central cause of the Civil War. It was the central cause of the Civil War. And the Civil War was not fought to end slavery. The Civil War was fought to bring the South back into the Union that succeeded from the Union because they wanted to maintain slavery. 8, slavery shaped the fundamental beliefs of Americans about race and whiteness, and white supremacy was a product of and legacy of slavery. Now, white supremacy predates slavery, okay? But it maintained, it existed after slavery ended. The ideology of white supremacy existed before the enslavement of African people. We have to be very clear on that. Enslaved and free people, 8, this is 9, enslaved and free people of African descent had a profound impact on American culture, producing leaders and literary, artistic, and folk traditions, etc., that continue to influence the nation. And 10, by knowing how to read and interpret the sources that tell the story of American slavery, we gain insight into some of what enslaving and enslaved Americans, enslaved Africans, created, thought, aspired to, and desired. Okay? Check out this article from AtlantaBlackStar.com. Most states failed to cover 10 topics recommended to provide students a clear understanding of slavery. This is from February 10th, 2018 by Nerissa Smith, AtlantaBlackStar.com. We're coming up on a break. When we come back from the break, we'll talk about the Malcolm X shirt in Queens, New York. We'll talk about the Dodge ad dealing with Dr. King, and we'll talk about the Black Panther movie. This is the African History Network show, 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. All right. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, the voice of Detroit. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Now, if you want me to do a presentation for your group or organization, you can email me at info, I-N-F-O, at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, info, I-N-F-O, at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. If you want me to do a presentation for African American History Month, etc. You can also call me, 313-462-0003, 313-462-0003. Okay? Right before the break, we were talking about the topic of what are our kids learning about slavery in school and how it's being mistaught. What are kids really learning about slavery in school? Most students don't know slavery was a central cause of the Civil War. All right? And then another article you can check out is from MSN.com, MSN.com. Students don't know slavery was the central cause of the Civil War, report shows. That's from February 2nd, 2018. And in the article, it talks about they interviewed Hassan Kwame Jeffries. Hassan Kwame Jeffries, who's an associate professor of history at Ohio State University. And he said it's important that everyone understand that slavery is truly at the foundation and formation of this nation. He said you really can't understand the American past or present without having a good grasp of the role that slavery played in this country. Okay. All right. So check out that article as well. All right. So we have this story coming out of Queens, New York. The Griot.com has an article about it. Also news1.com, I think yourblackworld.net. I think we put up an article at Your Black World about this as well. I'm a contributor to yourblackworld.net. You see we post articles from yourblackworld.net on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, throughout the day. White principal bans student from wearing Malcolm X on senior sweater. White principal bans student from wearing Malcolm X on senior sweater. Okay, interesting. This will pop up during African American History Month, right? So you have a senior at a Queens, New York high school called Christ the King High School. Okay, and the New York Daily News reported on this study also. The student's name is Malcolm Xavier Combs, C-O-M-B-S, Malcolm Xavier Combs. And a Queens assistant principal is under fire for mocking this student who wanted to wear Malcolm X's name on his senior sweater. Okay, so the school administrator's name is Veronica Arbitello, A-R-B-I-T-E-L-L-O, and she called him to her office to talk about his request to have his name on his sweater. And Malcolm Combs said, "She told me that's someone I don't want to be associated with." All I wanted was, he said, all I wanted was the name X. My name is Malcolm Xavier Combs. So Malcolm X is his real name. But Veronica Arbitello, the assistant principal at the school, took it one step further and then started to mock Combs for his request. The administrator laughed with her husband, Coach Joe Arbitello. They're both white, just so you, in case you're wondering, about the name, and introduced him as the new Malcolm X. So Malcolm Xavier Combs said, I felt insulted. They just laughed at me. That's my name, Malcolm X, not a nickname. Now, although Malcolm Combs ended up canceling the order for the sweater, because this was a sweater that they were having, the seniors could order sweaters with their name on them, okay? And News1.com has an article about this also called High School Not Allowing Malcolm X on a Student's Sweatshirt, even though that's his legal name. They both picked up the article from the New York Daily News. New York Daily News. Name of that article from New York Daily News is called Queens School Rejects Student's Bid to Add His Name Malcolm X on Senior Sweater, then mocks him. Okay? And in the article from the New York Daily News, it says, it talks about how the students' parents were outraged by the decision, noting that the school appeared unfamiliar with Malcolm X or what he represents. Michelle Combs is Malcolm Combs' mother. She said they pulled him out of class to tell him that a man who said, quote, a man without an education, you have nothing, is someone he should not be associated with. Okay? Now, the original Malcolm X, right? Malcolm X remains a revered and controversial figure, a fiery orator who called for the freedom and equality of African Americans by any means necessary, mere months before his February 21st, 1965 assassination inside the Audubon Ballroom in Washington Heights. All right. Now, the school that Malcolm Combs attends, it costs $11,350 a year. It's a high school. It's appears to be a private high school. $11,350 a year. That's like college tuition at some state institutions, or that's like college tuition. Okay, so he talked about how he felt insulted. He canceled the order for the sweatshirt that cost $40 that had his name on it. All right. Now, Reverend Al Sharpton is getting involved in this also. The Root.com reported on this, as well as News1.com. This past Thursday, Reverend Al Sharpton was supposed to meet with administrators there at the school, I think also. So we'll have a follow-up to the story next week. While Combs' parents said they were not pursuing legal action against the school, they have scheduled a meeting this past Thursday at the school and have asked the Reverend Al Sharpton's National Action Network to attend the National Action Network. But I think Reverend Al said he was getting involved in this. We'll have more details on that next week. A crisis director for the National Action Network responded to the request, registering the organization's shock at the incident. Reverend Kevin McCall, said, quote, this is absurd that in 2018 we have to teach school administration how to be culturally sensitive. He goes on to say, in the spirit of Malcolm X, we're calling cultural inclusion events. We're calling cultural inclusion events with the school's administration so that they can understand what it means to be black in America. Okay. All right. So, and then also I think one of Malcolm X's daughters was supposed to be there also. Ilyasa Shabazz, one of Malcolm X's daughters, she offered to visit the high school for an assembly to educate students and staff about her father's legacy. The school, however, refused, and the school spokesman, Bill Cunningham, said, quote, the school has been teaching about Malcolm X for 20 years as part of African American History Month, end quote. So one, the question I would ask, that's in the article from newsone.com. One, the question I would ask is for a response like that from the assistant principal. Okay, what have you been teaching about Malcolm X? One. And two, do you only teach about Malcolm X during African American History Month, which is problematic? If you only teach about him during African American History Month, that's problematic. But, you know, unfortunately, see, this is, you know, I have African, see, this one, we have to teach this history at home. Two, even at white schools, you need to take these studies to the white schools, because this information has to be correctly taught in schools all across the country. Just like, so if they don't teach correctly about Malcolm X, you know they don't teach correctly about slavery. If this school does not teach correctly about Malcolm X, you know they don't teach correctly about slavery. Okay? Then we have the article from, we have the story about Dr. King. So there was a Dodge truck ad. There was a Dodge truck ad from the last Sunday Super Bowl. Okay, now I ain't watched the Super Bowl. I'm rolling with Colin Kaepernick, as I said before. I haven't watched any football games. Number one, we had a sorry Detroit Lions. But even if they were winning, I still wouldn't watch them. Colin Kaepernick was correct. He said, I'm not going to stand for a flag that oppresses black people. But in Jackie Robinson's 1972 autobiography, I Never Had It Made, he talked about in that book why he couldn't stand for the national anthem or the flag anymore also, or the Pledge of Allegiance. He talked about that as well. Jackie Robinson as well, who served in the military. Okay? Served in the military, broke the color barrier in Major League Baseball, 1947. He talked about why he couldn't stand for the flag either. Okay, so NBCnews.com has his article, Use of Martin Luther King Jr. to Sell Trucks Infuriates Admirers During Super Bowl. Use of Martin Luther King Jr. to sell trucks infuriates admirers during the Super Bowl. So the Super Bowl was February 4th, 2018. The excerpt of the speech that they used from Dr. King was an excerpt called the Drum Major Instinct. The Drum Major Instinct. Okay, the Drum Major Instinct. That was delivered February 8th, 1960, sorry, February 4th, 1968. February 4th, 1968. So when the ad debuted during the Super Bowl, February 4th, 2018, it was the 50th anniversary of Dr. King delivering this speech. All right? So the National Football League got the thrilling game it hoped for, but not a Super Bowl free of controversy. So you had people who were on social media talking about this ad. They had problems with it. An audience expected the top 100 million people watched the game. But American television's biggest annual audience also got a taste of something unexpected midway through the second quarter, with an ad opening with excerpts of Dr. King's 1968 speech, The Drum Major Instinct, based on a homily. Okay? So this 30-second spot turned into an homage to American patriotism, complete with pictures of U.S. Marines and a camouflage-clad soldier hugging his child. It was a pitch for Dodge Ram Trucks Built to Serve volunteer program. Built to Serve volunteer program, but the ad provoked outrage from many viewers and a rebuke from the King Center, which says its mission is to carry on his teachings, Dr. King's teachings, and to, quote, empower change makers who are continuing his efforts today. Okay? Now, they got approval from the estate of Dr. King, which is ran by his son, Dexter King. It was not the King Center that gave permission to use excerpts of Dr. King's speech. And it was not Martin Luther King III or Reverend Bernice King. Okay? So a bit later in the game, it was conservatives who weren't happy with the tone of an ad. This one, a T-Mobile spot. Okay. So we have that. But the biggest blowback, however, was reserved for Dodge. Now, to many commentators, the advertisement seemed to co-opt the martyred civil rights icon in the service of crass commercialism and unblinking patriotism. Now, Dr. King loudly opposed the Vietnam War and argued for military expenditures to be redirected to domestic spending, particularly to serve the poor. Now, also, Dr. King towards the end of his life, he argued for a guaranteed income for the poor as well. A guaranteed income from the poor also. That's oftentimes not talked about. Now, critics also cited that as one of the ironies that the ad attacked was that, like others in the broadcast, the ad cost Dodge more than $5 million to air. So this is, for a 30-second ad, it was a little more than $5 million for these commercials. Now, a tweet from the King Center stated, neither the King Center nor the Reverend Bernice King is the entity that approves the use of MLK's words or imagery for use in merchandise, entertainment, movies, music, artwork, etc., or advertisement, including tonight's Dodge Super Bowl commercial. All right. Now, although the King Center carries on Dr. King's teachings, a separate entity controls Dr. King's speeches and images. Okay, that entity is called Intellectual Properties Management, Inc. Intellectual Properties Management, Inc. Eric Tidwell is the managing director of the organization, but the organization is ran by Dexter King. So it was this entity and Dexter King that gave permission to use Dr. King's, the excerpt of Dr. King's speech. All right, and their statement said, quote, "We found that the overall message of the ad embodied Dr. King's philosophy that true greatness is achieved by serving others. Thus, we decided to be a part of the Rams, of Dodge Rams Built to Serve Super Bowl program." Okay, but so check out this article from now the excerpt from Dr. King that they used was you don't have to know the second theory of thermodynamics in physics to serve. You only need a heart full of grace and soul generated by love. Okay, so check out the rest of this article from NBCnews.com. Use of Martin Luther King Jr. to sell trucks infuriates admirers during Super Bowl. All right, now BlackAmericaWeb.com had an article about this because Reverend Al Sharpton did a commentary regarding this, and he talked about how if Dodge or Chrysler wants to use Dr. King's words, then they should live up to what Dr. King talked about. So he said, then he talked about how many executives do you have on your board, right? What percentage of your vendors are African-American owned vendors, okay? He talked about the economic portion of this. If you want to use Dr. King's words, you should live up to what Dr. King fought for. Now, if we look at an excerpt of this speech called the Drum Major Instinct, Dr. King speaks out in opposition against advertisers manipulating the African American community. So you can go to kingencyclopedia.stanford.edu. This is from Stanford University, kingencyclopedia.stanford.edu, and search for the Drum Major Instinct because they have the text of his speech there. Okay, and in his speech he says, now the presence of the instinct explains why we are so often taken by advertisers. The presence of this instinct explains why we are so often taken by advertisers. He said, you know, those gentlemen of massive verbal persuasion, and they have a way of saying things to you that kind of gets you into buying. In order to be a man of distinction, you must drink this whiskey. In order to make your neighbors envious, you must drive this type of car. In order to be lovely, to love, you must wear this kind of lipstick or this kind of perfume. And you know, before you know it, you're just buying that stuff. Yes, that's the way the advertisers do it. Now, this is an excerpt of Dr. King's speech that Chrysler used in the commercial. And in his speech, The Drum Major Instinct, Dr. King is speaking out against the manipulation of corporations using advertising to market to African Americans. He goes on to say in his speech from February 4th, 1968. People need to read this. I don't even know if Chrysler read this whole speech before they used this excerpt. He said, I got a letter the other day, and it was a new magazine coming out, and it opened up, Dear Dr. King, as you know, you are on many mailing lists, and you are categorized as highly intelligent, progressive, a lover of the arts and the sciences, and I know you will want to read what I have to say. So Dr. King goes on to say, of course I did. After you said all of that and explained me so exactly, of course, I wanted to read it, right? So he continues. He says, but very seriously, it goes through life. The drum major instinct is real. He said, and you know what else it causes to happen? It often causes us to live above our means. It often causes us to live above our means. It's nothing but the drum major instinct. Do you ever see people buy cars that they can't even begin to buy in terms of their income? You've seen people riding around in Cadillacs and Chryslers and who don't earn enough to have a good a Model T Ford, but it feeds a repressed ego. Now, this is the speech that Chrysler, Dodge took an excerpt from to promote their Built to Serve program, but ultimately it's designed to sell cars. And Dr. King is speaking out against the manipulation of corporations through advertising, trying to get us to buy cars we can't afford. He's speaking out against this in the very speech that they sampled. So he goes on to say, you know, economists tell us that your automobile should not cost more than half of your annual income. This is back at the time. It's different today, but back at the time, right? You know, economists tell us that your automobile should not cost more than half of your annual income. So if you make an income of $5,000, this is 1968, your car shouldn't cost more than about $2,500. That's just good economics. And if it's a family of two and both members of the family make $10,000, they would have to make out with one car. That would be good economics. Although it's often inconvenient, but so often haven't you seen people making $5,000 a year and driving a car that costs $6,000? It make $5,000 a year and drive a car that costs $6,000. You know, this is old, right? And they wonder why their ends never meet. That's a fact. Now, the economists also say that your house shouldn't cost, if you're buying a house, it shouldn't cost more than twice your income. That's based on the economy and how you would make ends meet. So if you have an income of $5,000, it's kind of difficult in this society. But say it's a family with an income of $10,000. The house should not cost much more than $20,000. Well, I've seen folks making $10,000 a year living in a $40,000 and $50,000 house. And you know, they just barely make it. They get a check every month somewhere, and they owe all of that out before it comes in. Never have anything to put away for rainy days. But now the problem is, it is the drum major instinct. And you know, you see people over and over again with the drum major instinct taking them over. And they just live their lives trying to outdo the Joneses. They got to get the coat. They got to get this coat because this particular coat is a little better and a little better looking than Mary's coat. And I got to drive this car because it's something about this car that makes my car a little better than my neighbor's car. I know a man, Dr. King said, I know a man who used to live in a $35,000 house. And other people started building $35,000 houses. So he built a $75,000 house. And then somebody else built a $75,000 house. And he built a $100,000 house. And I don't know where he's going to end up if he's going to live his life trying to keep up with the Joneses. All right. So check out this speech. Go to kingencyclopedia.stanford.edu. kingencyclopedia.stanford.edu. Okay. They have the complete text of Dr. King's speeches there. This is from Stanford University. This speech is from February 4th, 1968. It's called the Drum Major Instinct. And this is the speech that Chrysler, Dodge, took an excerpt from to promote their Built to Serve service program, but ultimately to sell Dodge trucks. Okay, I don't know if they actually read the entire speech before they sampled it. Maybe they should have. Whose decision was that? Okay. All right, so we know the Black Panther movie debuts February 16th, Friday, February 16th, 2018 already. You have $200 million in pre-ticket sales that are taking place. It's phenomenal what's happening. I'm going to see the movie. There have been a number of articles written about this, and let me give you this article. There's an article I meant to mention during the segment about what kids are learning about slavery in schools. I talked about this at my presentation last week in the Nandy's Knowledge Cafe. This is an article from theroot.com. New studies find that positive feelings about blackness improve academic performance for black girls. New studies find that positive feelings about blackness improve academic performance for black girls. And this was an article from this is from theroot.com, but they cite a study that was published in the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education. The Journal of Blacks in Higher Education. Okay, so check that out. So we may talk about this next week. All right, but there's a initiative to raise money to send African American students, or send students in general, to go see the Black Panther movie. TheRoot.com has an article, Black Panther Challenge raises more than $300,000 to send 23,000 kids to the theaters. Hashtag Black Panther Challenge. And they talk about Frederick Joseph, and he's now famous for his hashtag Black Panther Challenge and raising money through GoFundMe. And it says that the fundraising site GoFundMe has confirmed that some 300 campaigns on the site have collectively raised more than $300,000 combined, which will be enough to send about 23,000 children to see the Black Panther film, okay, in movie theaters this month. Now, donations have come from all 50 states, plus 30 countries around the world, and Frederick Joseph is still pushing for more to be done, because when we say everybody, we mean everybody. Now, he said that all children deserve to believe they can save the world, go on exciting adventures, or accomplish the impossible. I am grateful that all of you have answered the call and are taking action to help more kids watch their heroes on the big screen. He went on to say, let's keep pushing forward. If you are a teacher, buy tickets for your entire classroom. If you are a coach, take your team. If you are a community leader, do some organizing and get the kids and parents in your community to the theater. All right. GoFundMe has taken the initiative to start a new hashtag Black Panther Challenge that will accept donations and distribute the money to participating charities that may need help fulfilling their targets to take schools to see the film. In order to be eligible to receive the funds, the GoFundMe campaign must be started for or by a charity to take kids to see the movie. Okay. All right, so check out this article from TheRoot.com. TheRoot.com deals with the Black Panther Challenge, okay? All right. Now, also, there's a petition in the Huffington Post. Black Voices had an article about this. There's a petition to get Marvel Studios to reinvest 25% of the profits of the Black Panther film in the African American community. The article is entitled Petition Asks Marvel to Give 25% of Black Panther Profits to Black Communities. We have the ability to change the conditions, our communities, and us as a people. Okay, the petition reads. Check out that article from Huffington Post Black Voices also. All right. And a large percentage of the dollars that they're getting, the large percentage of the dollars that are buying these tickets are coming from African Americans. Okay, so I think that's something good. You can sign that petition. Check out that article. I'll sign the petition as well. We posted that article on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. So it's at change.org. A change.org petition is calling on Marvel Studios and the Walt Disney Company to invest 25% of the profits for the Black Panther film into the black community. This petition was created by a user named Chaz Gormley, Gormley. The petition's description said that Marvel and Walt Disney Company have targeted the black community with their advertisements for the film. This goes back to advertising, and my background's in marketing, so I understand this very well. Quote, through a clever, well-manufactured marketing campaign, Marvel Studios and their parent company, the Walt Disney Company, have targeted the black community with their advertisements for the upcoming Black Panther film, due to release February 16, 2018. As marginalized groups have become more vocal, corporations and their savvy public relations departments have turned to catering to these groups. Okay, all right. So check this out at Huffington Post Black Voices. You can listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the Voice of Detroit. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. 910 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Remember, right now is corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Stay tuned for Pastor Mo. We'll talk to you next week. Peace.